With Oppo and OnePlus being ultimately owned by the same parent company, these two phones share a lot of the same DNA. In the hardware design anyway. The matte finish on the back of both of these is very similar. Which one you prefer is down to personal preference. The Reno is a bit wider and thicker than the OnePlus 7 Pro, but that's because that camera unit at the back there is completely flush. The OnePlus 7 Pro has a camera bump and also a curved screen, meaning it's slightly narrower. Those camera systems, although looking similar, have some very big differences, but not as big as the operating systems. ColorOS is very similar to iOS. There's no app drawer as standard, and overall the entire operating system feels very similar to what you'd get on an iPhone. ColorOS has come on a lot in the last few years. It's a very simple operating system and I personally like it. Oxygen OS is completely different. This is a Chinese mainland unit and so has Hydrogen OS, but they are very, very similar. You get an app drawer as standard on this phone and the entire operating system feels completely and utterly different from ColorOS in terms of design. Both operating systems have their good points and bad points. Again, which one you prefer would be up to you. So let's get right on to a camera test between these two. This is the OnePlus 7 Pro. You have an ultra wide camera. It goes through to a main camera, which is a 48 megapixel shooter, the same as on the Oppo Reno. And then here is the zoom. You get a 3x zoom button, and then you can also zoom in up to 10 times. Taking photos with the 10x zoom is impressive. You can see just how far this building is away from me, and the detail that is kept is very good. But as we know, this Reno is specifically a zoom camera. So zooming in up until 20 or 25 times still retains so much detail. If you zoom in 30, 40, 50 or 60 times, it loses detail, but anywhere up to 25 is still incredible. Looking at pictures side by side, there are definite color differences between them. And of course, zooming in using the Oppo Reno, you get such detail in the shot. And that's just a shot that you cannot take with the OnePlus 7 Pro. As they both share the same sensor under that main camera, differences will come in the color profiles of the images rather than detail. But zooming in, obviously the Oppo Reno does retain a lot of detail that the OnePlus 7 Pro just can't. But wow, look at this shot that you get on the Oppo Reno. You just can't get this shot from the OnePlus 7 Pro because it doesn't have that zoom range. There's so much detail in this shot. The colors are so rich, it looks like it was taken on a DSLR with a long zoom lens. It's really, really impressive. But like I said, if you push the camera past about 25 times zoom, things start getting a little bit blurry and it appears digitally enhanced. The noise in this part of the image on the OnePlus 7 Pro is because it is digitally enhancing it. Whereas on the Oppo Reno, the image is much richer and has a lot more detail. Even though both phones have an ultra-wide camera and a zoom camera, you can only take video using that main 48 megapixel shooter. It's slightly disappointing that neither have ultra-wide for video. I personally think that is a really great feature and I use that a lot. Just to let you know that this was a stabilization test and I was afraid that this was going to be completely unusable. This was unbelievably shaky. Micro jitters because I was riding a bike and also just huge movements from hand holding these. I'm really impressed with how both of these just stabilized incredibly shaky footage. Moving on to a zoom test for video, even though the Oppo Reno has an amazing zoom camera, that only works for photo, not in video. It digitally zooms in on the main sensor when zooming for video. And you can see this is 5x zoom. If you push it further, things just get really blurry. Bearing in mind that it was dusk, so the light was pretty low, but both phones give you very similar results from video in zoom. They both use that main camera and you don't get any of the advantages of the zoom camera from the Oppo in video. Having said that, overall, the Oppo is obviously the clear winner when it comes to the camera department. All right, let's move on. Both of the fingerprint sensors in these are lightning quick. Actually, two of the quickest sensors that I've ever tested. Although the OnePlus does unlock the phone slightly quicker than the Oppo, I think that's down to the animation being shorter. Although in real world usage, if you weren't slowing it down to 240 frames a second, there's really not much difference between them. In daily usage, both phones will perform about the same for you. This is just a test of opening a few apps and seeing how many are kept in memory or have to be reloaded. Flicking through the games and web-based apps as a little test to replicate daily usage. Actually, both of these phones keep all of the apps in memory. Anyway, both of the phones share the same Snapdragon 855 processor. So in terms of power, actually, both of the phones are about the same. They're called different names, but both of them have a gaming mode that turns off notifications and enhances the phone whilst you're gaming. Here are the Antutu scores. The main difference between the two phones when it comes to gaming, which we'll get onto in a second, is the screen on this OnePlus 7 Pro. You can change from 60 to 90 Hz, but you can also change the resolution up to Quad HD. That's something that you can't do on the Reno. Having said that though, you only notice the difference between these two screens when you are playing them side by side. The 90 Hz refresh rate and the Quad HD resolution on the OnePlus 7 Pro is obviously an advantage it has over the Reno. Having said that, the rest of the gaming experience is actually really similar. The screen on the Oppo is very good too, and actually having a bigger screen and a flat screen is going to be preferred by a lot of people. Just as a side note, when I did choose Quad HD and 90 Hz refresh rates on the OnePlus, I did notice it lag on a couple of occasions. Maxing out the settings is going to push that Snapdragon to the limit. The batteries on them are around about the same size, but that screen on the OnePlus is going to drain the battery a lot quicker than the screen on the Reno. These phones are incredibly similar in a lot of ways. For example, the speakers and the haptic engine in both of them, as far as I can tell, are exactly the same. Now, it's your choice whether you go for a phone that focuses on the camera, like the Oppo Reno, and everything else is also very good, but the camera is the main selling point of that phone, or you want the OnePlus 7 Pro, which focuses heavily on the screen, 90 Hz refresh rate, Quad HD, everything else is really good, but the main selling point is the screen. So the choice is up to you. Are you a photographer or are you a gamer? That may sway your decision one way, but the other aspects of both of these phones are also really, really high quality. Two amazing phones, and you can't go wrong with either of them.